Madam Chair, if I may,
Please.
Assemblyman Wagner, I appreciate the question, and though I know your suggestion of cynicism was not directed toward me, you said so. You said so.
No, sir.
I'm going to take the opportunity to respond for the Department of Finance and let them add if I leave anything out. Let's be careful to compare apples and apples here. When we first introduced SB 3 in January of 2014, our proposal was to get to $13 an hour by 2017. I think you're looking at an analysis of that bill.
Yes.
This proposal wouldn't get us to $13 an hour until 2020, 3 full years later. So I'm sure that impacts a different analysis. Additionally, through our efforts, and I'm sure the voices of many others, working with the administration, working with the Department of Finance, we never bought into this negative effect of approaching $4 billion, as you're making reference to. We have always said, again, with the assistance of analysis from the University of California, Berkeley, that not only will we see some additional costs to the state, we recognize that fully, but that will be offset by the decrease in caseloads. We're going to have a couple million Californians no longer qualifying for a number of public benefit programs, in addition to additional sales tax revenue for the state and additional personal income tax revenue. And that's how it balances it out. So we never bought into the $4 billion. I'd like to think some of our conversations with the administration has shifted their opinion to somewhat more in that direction. And again, in addition to that, the 3-year delay of even getting to $13 an hour, it pretty much answers your question.
Thank you. We're going to...
Well, no, it doesn't. But I understand that that's your position. I haven't heard about the $15 an hour, why that's a magic
thank
number.
you very much. So again, when we introduced the prior version of SB 3 in January of 14, we set our sights on getting to $13 an hour, which equates to about $26,000 per year, which is just above, if not at, the federal poverty line for a family of 4. Again, our basic philosophy, as I said earlier, was to make sure that it's no longer legal to pay a sub-poverty wage in California. That was for 2017. This is $15 an hour by 2022, and that is just slightly above FPL. That is our goal, to get it to FPL, maybe just above. It's not a magic number. It's just above FPL. And then the CPI index is to make sure it never dips below poverty line again.
Okay, but okay, that tells me why it's at that number. But what I'm saying, what I'm asking you is, if there are no negative impacts, or if they wash out and there are positive impacts, isn't that also the case if we set it at $20 an hour? Why not give somebody? Why peg these folks at the slightly above the federal poverty level? Why not give them 10% more than the federal poverty level, or 15, or 20, or 50%? What's the magic of the federal poverty level? What's wrong with
Mr. Wagner, I'm going to let you, but I'm going to cut off the question at this point because this bill does not anticipate raising the minimum wage to $20 an hour. I would love to run that bill and look forward to your support of it. But we were going to keep to the merits.
I will support
of this
that bill. I will support that bill, Madam Chair, if there's an economic analysis that tells me that's the right number. I'm trying to dig into what is the right number and why is it 15.
I would just add that we believe that at higher minimum wages there would be negative effects. I can't say whether it would be at 20 or 25 yet. I'll be able to tell you that in a month or two when I run more numbers. But some of the negative effects become bigger when you get to higher minimum wages, like more automation, and some of the positive effects become smaller because the people who are getting the increases are now more coming from households that do some savings, and so that's not all. The increased purchasing power doesn't necessarily translate into actual spending. So there are reasons that while it balances more or less at this level, it would not at a higher level.
Thank you. We're going to move on now to Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Senator Leno, I want to just acknowledge your bold leadership in continuing the conversation to addressing the income inequality issues and trying to turn around the tide as it relates to the rising child poverty, that exists here in California. I do want to just say that, I associate myself with the economics of if you put more money in people's pockets that we can generate income growth in our regional economies. And so I just want to preface my comments by saying that. I do want to just talk a little bit about the region that I represent and would associate some of the comments made by the California Chamber of Commerce representative. I represent Imperial County that continues to see a 21% unemployment rate and at sometimes higher than 28%. And so much of the concerns that have been raised from that region as it relates to raising the minimum wage are coming from our small businesses. And our small businesses are not small businesses such as the ones that you'd see in the more urbanized metropolitan areas of the state. We're talking about small mom-and-pop operations, whether it be the local hair salon, the panaderia down the street, or for that matter, the small restaurant that is owned by a small family, perhaps under 25 employees. And so the impacts that it will have on these small businesses. And so I don't know if we are set on the employee count of 25. I don't know if, at different times we've cited small businesses being at 100, 25 in some instances. I don't know if there's going to be some discussion or negotiations around that area, but I just wanted to put that out there as some of the concerns. And I'm not, necessarily saying that we should look at that number being moved, but I think that we should have a consistent, small business definition here in California. And as I mentioned, sometimes it's 100, sometimes it's 25. I also want to just talk a little bit about some of the comments that have raised by the, I guess, in between, advocates that spoke today, the developmentally disabled community. I think we did get some phone calls in our office in regards to some of the unintended consequences of raising the minimum wage the last go around. And so how are we going to create a program, an exemption, or an opportunity so that we're not impacting the employment opportunities for the developmentally disabled community? At the same time, it was raised by the California Restaurant Association, young people, level entry jobs, how does that impact? And so I'm hoping that as we move forward, we can address some of those questions or comments that were made. And I'll just conclude by saying that I'm going to support the measure today, but there are some issues that have been raised in a community like Imperial County that continues to see high levels of unemployment, and I'm hoping that we're able to address some of those as we move forward. So there isn't a question. I just wanted to make that statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, not only for your support, Assemblyman Garcia, but also for your thoughtfulness on this. There are many complex intended and unintended consequences, and we have to be very mindful of them as we go forward.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and Ms. Ching.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, California, we all know that California has the biggest poverty problem in the nation, and I'm very sensitive to this issue. The question is, how do we raise people out of poverty? I think that's what we're all trying to figure out. Last year I was proud to support the Earned Income Tax Credit last year, and I'm actually doing a workshop next week to provide these services to my constituents. And Senator Leno, I know that you were talking about rent, and last year I also carried a bill that would provide a renter's tax credit for low-income households, and I think that's also important. I am very, very concerned about the unintended consequences. I think it's been mentioned several times already, but I got to tell you, everything is moving towards automation right now. I'm very concerned about workers' jobs. How many people are going to have their hours cut? How many people are going to lose their jobs? How many people are not going to actually obtain jobs in the future when they otherwise could have been considered? And the one-size-fits-all is not a great approach. I mean, something that would work for San Francisco may not work in my district or my community. I just want to say that I support the intent. I'm sensitive to the intent, but I'm just not convinced that it is going to have the intended impact. And I want to work together with my colleagues so that we can raise people out of poverty and so that they can reach the middle class. I don't think anyone should just be surviving on minimum wage, and I am imploring my colleagues if we can try to find a comprehensive solution rather than just pushing this through in the past 2 days. We only had 2 days to take a look at this, and I'm just asking us to kind of take a measured approach, and hopefully we can work together on a solution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go ahead to Mr. Gallagher.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members. I'm really asking members today to really consider the effects of my district. I mean, that's why I'm here. I was elected to represent their interests. A lot of my constituents can't be here today. A lot of my constituents who are affected by this. They own diners, they own coffee shops, they compete with Starbucks. They're farmers, they're farm workers. And this is not every region of California is the same, okay? And we have to recognize that with this policy. And one of the main points I want to encourage today is that we really look at, can we do a regional minimum wage? And can we look at how cost of living is different, cost of housing is different. A living wage in some parts of the state is going to be different than what it is in San Francisco. And I think we really have to consider that. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about my district, okay? There's a lot of people who feel like it's just piling on. We had a very vibrant timber industry in the 70s, 80s, and then because of policies, that's largely died off. A lot of people are unemployed as a result. We had a very vibrant mining industry. That's been largely evaporated away. We have manufacturing jobs. We'd like to have a whole lot more of them, but that's because of policies that's been difficult to increase manufacturing. As many of you know, California is last in manufacturing jobs created. So a lot of my district is agricultural based and related to agriculture and small business, just like my colleague from Coachella was bringing up. And they can't bear a $15 an hour minimum wage. They're not going to be able to pay that. And their result is either they're going out of business, they're going to reduce their labor force in whatever way they can, which means those people who are already struggling. And by the way, we bring up unemployment. In some parts of California, unemployment rates are great. They're not really good in my district, and they're not in my colleague from Coachella's. We're in double digits, I'm trying to increase the amount of jobs that are available. So when people say, oh, well, it's just a negligible impact to jobs, well, that's a big deal in my district because I already can't afford to lose any more. And the other part is, you talk about the cost of living, and one witness brought up paying a PG&E bill. We're paying 41% more for residential electricity than any other state in the country. So yeah, people are having to make real decisions about that. And when we do this, there's disagreements among economists about whether or not what the impact of job losses is, but there is no disagreement. This will increase cost of living, the cost of food. The cost of your basic goods will go up. So what happens to that low-wage worker when they get the increase but their cost of living goes up? That's a question we really have to consider here. And in some areas, maybe that's more bearable than others, but I can tell you from my district, it's not. And okay. I'd love it if they could be here to tell people personally and give their personal stories, but they can't do that. And I just found out about this on Saturday night through an article. And that's another point, because we're the assembly. We're the people's body. We're represented.
I'm going to ask for a question if there is one. I understand your frustration, but
let me just finish with this. Nobody called when this deal was reached. Nobody called the gentleman from Coachella. Nobody called the gentleman from, Yuba City. Nobody called you, Madam Chairman, either. Nobody called the Speaker of the Assembly. We're the ones that are supposed to make law around here. We represent these people who are affected by this. But nobody called us. And I don't think we should be rushed to go do a policy when we're the ones that we should be making these decisions. And so I would encourage the body to do that today. Let's sit down, let's work through these issues, and let's have a thoughtful process, not a rushed one. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move to Mr. Hernandez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to keep my comments brief. But as chair of the Labor and Employment Committee, I wanted to comment briefly on the importance of this bill. We all know that we have real problems here in California, particularly when it comes to income inequality. Our middle class has been losing traction. Every day when I'm able to talk to my constituents, when I'm able to have the opportunity to host town halls and community coffees, and I share with the folks the good news that our economy has rebounded, that we've gone from 12% unemployment to 6% unemployment, I get a look of bewilderment. And I ask, why the bewildered look? And most people tell me, what rebound? what recovery? We know from studies and research and all the empirical data that the vast majority, that the vast majority of Californians, 90-some-odd%, are not experiencing the recovery. The recovery has been held largely in the hands of the top 1 or 2% of Californians. So we know resources are moving in California, and incomes and saving accounts are getting growing. But again, for the richest Californians here. And that's not an equitable California. That's not a California that believes that we all should move up together, that we should all benefit as a people and as a state. So enough is enough. With this bill, we have a tremendous opportunity to right the ship. And this bill is a measured approach. We heard today from the Chamber of Commerce, Ms. Pereira, acknowledging that this bill was a better bill than the ballot items, the ballot proposals before us in the November election. It is measured. I support the two ballot propositions because I think that they are more ambitious. I think that they get us to a better place quicker. I do recognize, though, that those bills do release from the legislature our control and our ability to make changes should there be a downturn. And when we look at our historic picture here in the state of California, there is a cyclical nature to our economy. Economies go up and down. This bill acknowledges the cries from the business community, the small business community, and understands that we will have times where we may have to make adjustments. This bill provides us that opportunity. The bill has off-ramps for economic and budget reasons. Indexing is narrow and capped at no more than 3.5%. And the bottom line is that we, as a legislature, we will retain the power to make future adjustments if needed. We lose that control, as I've noted earlier, if it just is decided by the voters. And the voters have the strongest will of all of us in this room to make this happen. For those of you that know, the polling is significantly strong. It's in the high 60s. So we either make a decision here that is balanced, that is one that takes into account the cries and the concerns of the business community, balancing that with the calls of the vast majority of Californians that say it's time. It's time that we benefit from a recovery as well. But we cannot compromise on taking this first step. Working people can't afford to wait any longer. I know the people in my district can't. So I strongly stand in support. I'm pleased that you've been relentless, Senator Leno. I'm pleased that the labor community and the leadership has stood strong on behalf of its membership, as it should. And I'm glad today that we hear an acknowledgement from the Chamber of Commerce that this is a better approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we're not going to applaud. Thank you. We're not going to applaud that. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Leno, thanks for your patience today and long suffering with the questions and brief comments from
Go right ahead. Go right ahead. That's what we're here for.
I do share the concerns of my colleagues from Orange County and Beaver in that, there are some negative impacts, I believe, from this type of legislation. And I especially agree with my colleague from Orange County that if there was an economic analysis that said that $15 an hour is the right number, then I'm all about that. Then let's move in that direction, or whatever the right number is. The good news is, and I'm glad that you're the presenter today because you can speak to this. The good news is we have a microeconomy in California that's already experimenting with this idea, and that's San Francisco. And so I have an article from Forbes magazine, and this is actually from last year, from July 2015. We're seeing the effects of the minimum wage rise in San Francisco, and the premise of the article is that there's three reactions to a minimum wage. One is that the number of jobs decreases, the cost of labor obviously increases, so the prices for those products and or goods or services increases, and then the last result is that there's higher unemployment. So, and it walks through, some of those results for higher unemployment are businesses that used to be open now have to close because this is just the final straw that breaks the camel's back, that they can't move to this labor cost, and they just make the economic decision or personal decision to close their business. The article specifically points out a comic book store, Then it goes through and gives some examples of a Chipotle and some other fast food outlets in San Francisco. So my specific question is, what are you seeing as a representative of San Francisco? What are you personally seeing as a result? I think in San Francisco the minimum wage right now is at $12.25, moving towards $13. I'm hearing articles and seeing articles that McDonald's they're laying off their front counter folks to replace them with iPads to do their orders. They're automating more of their behind the counter process, switching over to robots and more automation so that they can reduce the cost of their labor, which reduces the number of jobs available for folks who are just. I've got my two sons are here this morning. One's 16, one's 20. They're a minimum wage job worker. They're trying to get into this market, but if they're priced out of the market and they can't get a job, how does that help them? So the question is, what are you experiencing in San Francisco that supports this idea moving forward with a $15 minimum wage?
If I could control San Francisco's economy with one turn of a dial, I would slightly turn it down right now. It is so red hot. There is so much venture capital money flooding our city. It is putting into disbalance just about everything we all take for granted as our daily life. There are certainly anecdotal stories of certain businesses having closed, but industries are thriving. More restaurants are opening than closing. More small business licenses are being taken out than our small business doors being closed. This is all happening right now. Now, at the same time, we have some of the greatest economic disparity of any city in California, maybe in the nation. But that's a complex situation in itself, very much driven by the excitement and the demand in the technology industry, which has created over 60,000 jobs in just the past couple of years, and this is in a city of fewer than 1 million people. Very high-paying jobs, and a lot of these folks are coming from outside of San Francisco, outside of California, for this new, now termed gold rush. So there are a lot of San Franciscans who have been in town for decades, if not generations, who are struggling and who are suffering, who aren't a part of this gold rush. So we've got our challenges, very different challenges from Mr. Gallagher's district, but challenges very serious. Real poverty in our district as well.
Well, I think I
okay, we're going to, because there's still more questions.
I want to clarify my question.
Okay.
If I can clarify my question.
Sure.
Because I agree with you with the disparity. And as a matter of fact, on the drive over here, with what my son was asking me about that, and I explained exactly what you just explained.
Yes.
This type of legislation, this type of economic control, command and control over the economy, which is really what we're doing. We're telling the economy what you can and cannot do. We're telling businesses what you can and cannot do from the legislature. We're removing liberty from the opportunity to own a business and work in that business as a minimum wage worker. So acknowledging and agreeing with you on the disparity of the economy in San Francisco and other parts of California, the point of this legislation is to help the people at the lowest social economic level in California. If you raise the minimum wage, and just to pick a number, there was 100 jobs at minimum wage yesterday, and there's 50 minimum wage jobs at the new minimum wage next year. How did you help those 50 people that no longer have a job? They were replaced with an iPad at the McDonald's or the Chipotle.
Madam Chair, I'll promise to be brief.
Please.
Number one, I don't buy your frame that this bill is going to cut the number of jobs in California by half. No, I can show you that in the past 20 months, over which time we've raised our minimum wage by $2 an hour, we've seen our California state unemployment go from 7.4 to 5.5. That's just a fact. But with regard to automation cannot be stopped. Advances in technology cannot be slowed down. It is on a rampage right now. It's going to continue to happen whether McDonald's workers in San Francisco are getting $11.50 an hour or $12.50 an hour. It's going to happen.
Okay, we're going to move on to Mr. Daly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've made it clear since I came to the Capitol that I agree and support smart and careful increases in the minimum wage. I've also made it clear that I do not support indexing the minimum wage to the Consumer Price Index from Sacramento. I supported AB 10 3 years ago when the CPI clause was removed, and I would support today's proposal if the CPI clause is removed. I believe the authority of raising the minimum wage should remain with the legislature and governor and not be continually tied to annual inflation measures. And I don't believe we should put state budget spending in the future on autopilot without a reliable revenue source. For these reasons, I regrettably will be voting no on this measure. Mr. Leno, your proposal has been so well articulated by you. I salute your clear reasoning, but I do have that concern with the CPI clause, and I want to thank my colleagues for their patience.
Thank you. And I want to thank everybody. I want to be clear that I gave a lot of leeway to all the members today because I know this is the only hearing, but don't expect appropriations to be run this way in the future. This is a unique opportunity. And I do understand that people come from different places and have different issues. I want to point out one thing that hasn't been brought up a lot. I'm very thrilled that this bill finally puts IHSS workers in a position with the rest of California in granting them paid sick leave. Obviously, that's something near and dear to my heart that we're fixing this bill, and I'm glad that the governor has evolved in his thinking on that. I want to thank you for bringing this bill forward. And I want to remind people that, there was a lot of talk about cost of living increases. Well, the reality is the cost has gone up. It goes up every year, and yet our wage stagnation is something that affects my district incredibly. My district are the folks who are working at those diners and those McDonald's and those retail shops. And at minimum wage, there is no possible way, even if you were able to have a full 40-hour work week, which so many of these massive corporations don't grant, there's no way to make ends meet. It's hard to find a single-family house in my district because there are multiple families living in those single-family homes. We have a situation by which even with a full-time job, they're relying on food stamps and public housing and free lunch programs. We are subsidizing all of these businesses who are not providing enough for people to live on. These are decisions we have to make. Might there be unintended consequences? There might be. And that is why this is such a prudent approach. When I was first told about this deal, I was disappointed, quite frankly. I had hoped for something much more aggressive, like the ballot initiatives. I had hoped for something that was certain. But in reality, the beauty of this is if there are unintended consequences, if we do have a downfall, if at some point we don't want an automatic increase, that will always be in our hands. It'll be in the legislature's hands to make that decision by a majority vote. That is our job. It is our job to say we need to fix things. And for so many of the issues brought up, the rising cost of energy, the rising cost of housing, the fact that there's unemployment, and we need to focus our attention on those areas of the state that are heavily unemployed, we do. Those are other bills. This bill is about sending I'm happy to work with you, but this bill is about sending a standard for all workers. I appreciate that you brought it forward. I appreciate the measured approach and that you keep moving forward. And I'm going to ask you if you have any closing. I'm sure you don't. You're going to just ask for an aye vote. And we will conclude this hearing. Senator Leno. Do you have a closing?
I'll narrow my closing comments to just say I wanted to thank you, Madam Chair, for your leadership on paid sick leave days, and that this bill will restore those 3 days for IHSS workers, the first day in 2018, the second day in 2020, and the third day in 2022. If I may, just very, very briefly, not to change anyone's opinion or mind here or vote, but the reasoning behind the CPI escalator. We have a $7.25 minimum wage federally. And the reason it is so very, very low, and so many people are living in deep poverty who are working full-time jobs and likely never will have an opportunity to ever break out of that, and children born into it will live their whole lives that way, is because Congress is just frozen in action. And if it had, the federal, a CPI indexing, it wouldn't be 725. So there's reason for it. So we don't have to each of us go through this every 3, 5, 7 years. It does have a cap, as was mentioned by Mr. Hernandez. It's a thoughtful cap as well. So many thanks to my joint authors, Senator Leyva and Senator DeLeon, and also, first and foremost, thanks to all of those who took off time from their minimum wage jobs at threat of losing their jobs, and that would be all of those who participated in Fight for 15. They're the ones who move the dial. They're the ones who move this debate. Those are the ones who got us here today, and I ask for your aye vote.
Great. Thank you very much. There's been, you probably want this part to be finalized. There's been a motion by Assemblymember Hernandez and a second by Assemblymember Calderon, and with that, this does pass with a B roll call vote with Mr. Daly voting no. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Meeting adjourned.